Alright, this video is all about average value, and we're talking about how to find the average value of a function, f of x. It's kind of like finding the average value of just regular numbers. If I asked you to find the average of 10 numbers, you would take all 10 numbers, add them up all together, and divide by 10. Or if I said find the average of like 4 different people's test scores, you would add up their 4 test scores, divide by 4, that'd be your average answer. Well, same thing if you want to find the average of a function f of x. If I want to know what the average from a to b is, I could take all the points from a to b, add them up, and divide by how many there are. But here's the thing, if I was to pick all the points between a and b, where are you going to pick the points? Somebody might say, okay, I'll go by even increments of 1. So they'll pick every other one of, every point, add them up, get the average value. But what if you want to be really precise and you actually wanted to pick every single possible point in between here? Think about how many possible points that is. This could be 1.1. This could be 1.11. This could be 1.1111117. So really, if you think of all the little decimals that are in between here, there's infinitely many small points that connect this curve. So you're not actually going to be able to sit down and add up every point and then divide by how many there are, because there's infinitely many. That'd be impossible. But we have a solution. If I want to add up all those points, I can use an integral to do it. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to average from a to b. So there's kind of a formula. You're going to take 1 divided by b minus a, and then you're going to times it by the integral from a to b of this function f of x dx. And this is the formula for calculating the average value. We call it f_av, f sub av for average value. So we're going to kind of like pick an example here. I'm going to say example 1. Suppose you have a function f of x equals, and maybe it's like some parabola. How about an upside down parabola? 9 minus x squared. And I want to find the average value of this function. So find the average value of f of x. And how about find the average value of f of x? I'm going to say on the interval from like 0 to 5. Okay, well, we can do this. We can find the average value from 0 to 5. And we can think about the graph too. I'll slide this up. Maybe keep the formula there so you can see it. But this is a graph that we can imagine. It's an upside down parabola, 9 minus x squared. So we're talking about, a graph that's shifted up 9 and it's pointing downwards. And we want to find the average value from 0 to 5. So 5 is probably somewhere out here, which means here's 0. I want to find all the points between 0 and 5. So if I took all of these points all the way out to 5, which is going to take me a while, added them all up and divided by how many there were, that would be the average value. Pretty impossible to do by hand though. So I'm going to use my formula instead. And so I'm going to say, okay, I want the f_av, the average value. And I'm going to use this formula up top here. So I'm going to put a box around this thing. This is what we got to remember. The average formula says from a to b. 0 to 5 is your a and b. So if I have to do 1 divided by b minus a, it's going to be 1 divided by 5 minus 0. Integral a to b, integral 0 to 5 of f of x dx. And that's what I'm going to use to solve. So let's plug in some values here. First of all, let's just make this a 1/5. Integral 0 to 5. And then f of x, I'm going to plug in the 9 minus x squared. That's really the function. So f_av is going to equal 1/5 integral 0 to 5. So then let's antiderive this thing. We're going to have 1/5 out in front. 9 minus x squared, think backwards on this. 9 antiderives and becomes 9x. And minus x squared becomes minus x cubed over 3. And we're not going to put a plus c on here because we've got bounds. We're going to bracket this thing from 0 to 5. And then the whole answer is going to be times 1/5. So I'm going to put a big parenthesis. 1/5 times all of this. So now we just got to plug in all the values and solve, basically. So from here, it's just doing the math. I might keep the 1/5 out in front. Just ignore that it's even there and plug in all my values. So here's the 1/5. It's kind of messy. So 1/5 times big parenthesis. Let's plug in the top minus the bottom. So plug in the top, we're going to have 9 times 5 minus 5 cubed divided by 3. And then we're going to subtract and plug in 0, but 9 times 0 minus 0 cubed divided by 3 technically is all 0. So all of this won't really matter too much, which means I'm really going to have 1/5 times, and then we're going to multiply all this out. We're going to have 9 times 5 is 45. 5 cubed is 5 times 5 times 5. That's 125 divided by 3. And 125 divided by 3, it's a decimal. We're going to have to either do some common denominators here, clean this up. I think, why don't we just plug this into the calculator and get a decimal for this final answer. So I'm going to do, I'll scoot this over so we can see both things. I'm going to do 45 minus 125 divided by 3. 3.3 repeating, or if you wanted to make it a fraction, 10/3. So we have 1/5, we have down at the bottom here, we have 1/5 times 10/3, which if we reduce that 10/5, we can reduce that down and make it, the final answer is 2/3. So the average value of this function is 2/3, or if you did it on the calculator, 1/5 times 10 divided by 3, it's going to be the same thing, 0.666 repeating, which is 2/3. So either way, but there's our average value. So final answer for this is going to be, we'll write it over here, FAV equals 2/3. And that's basically how you find the average value. It means on that graph that we drew a few minutes ago, that parabola, all those points, if I added up all these points and divided by how many there were, the average of all the points is going to be right around 2/3 on the graph. And so that's kind of what we figured out. So average value of a function. Biggest thing you got to know is if you can memorize this formula from the start, memorize the average value formula, you'll kind of have it made. Hardest part that kids have trouble with is they get it confused with average rate of change. Average rate and average value, kind of two different things. So you've got to be really careful. Read your problems carefully.